Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to CHCI Summit session titled Energy Solutions for a Better Planet. My name is Winta Menges, and I'm the Senior Director of Corporate and Foundation Relations at CHCI, who had the distinct pleasure of working with our strategic partners in energy to bring this panel to you. Now, as a mother of 2 children, I am passionate about reducing our carbon footprint to make it safer for our planet and the future generation. I'm therefore honored to introduce this panel to you. Now, prior to introducing our panel host, I would like to thank Dps Energy, Edison International, and Commonwealth Edison, an Exelon company, for their generous support of this session. Before we begin our panel, it is my distinct privilege to introduce our panel host, Congresswoman Nanette Diaz-Barragan, CHCI's second Vice Chair. Congresswoman Barragan was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in November 2016, becoming the first Latina ever to represent California's 44th Congressional District. Nanette serves as a voice for the communities that have been on the front lines of the negative health impacts associated with climate change and environmental injustice. From fighting for comprehensive and affordable healthcare for all, to ensuring clean air and clean water for her communities, she works tirelessly for her fellow Americans and the constituents of California's 44th Congressional District. It is an honor to have you, Congresswoman Barragan. Now, in this session, we're going to hear from energy sector leaders and climate advocates on building clean and sustainable energy solutions for healthier communities. To help us moderate this important and timely discussion, we are delighted to have Val Story, the Project Director for the Clean Energy States Alliance, CESA. CESA is a national nonprofit coalition of public agencies and organizations working together to advance clean energy. Val leads projects focused on building electrification and offshore wind policy. She also coordinates a multi-state initiative to develop tools that support and accelerate the deployment of renewable heating and cooling technologies. Additionally, she co-directs CESA's offshore wind project. Welcome, everyone, and I hope you enjoy this session. And please, don't forget to continue the conversation on social media with the hashtag CHCIHHM20. But before we hear from Congresswoman Barragan and the rest of the panel, I would like to welcome Joe Dominguez, the CEO at ComEd, for brief sponsor remarks. Welcome, Joe.
Good morning, my name is Joe Dominguez and I'm the CEO at ComEd. While we are unable to meet in person this year, I am honored to speak with you today. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, members of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, panelists, fellows, colleagues, and sponsors. Like CHCI, we at ComEd are committed to empowering and supporting Latinos and Latinas pursuing careers in STEM through meaningful partnerships and scholarships. At ComEd, we are powering a cleaner and brighter future for our community. Today, our customers have more choices than ever before to receive reliable, affordable, and clean energy, and we are committed to driving that progress forward. To ensure that our customers have access to renewable energy, including opting into solar energy, we developed an online solar calculator to help our customers explore solar energy options. We're firm believers in renewable energy for all. Through community solar, we have expanded access to solar power for renters, customers, and those who have shaded roofs or properties, and customers who choose not to install solar systems at homes or businesses for a variety of reasons. Today, ComEd is a national leader in the delivery of clean energy, with 92% of its power coming from sources that do not produce air pollution. As a Latino and an asthma sufferer, working on clean air solutions is part of what inspires me every day in my work. We all know that Latino families often live in areas where air quality is compromised by traffic congestion, power plants, and industrial emissions. That's why ComEd is playing a lead role in clean energy and is helping to transition school buses, public transportation, cars, and trucks from dirty fossil fuels to clean electricity. Again, thank you to the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute, the CHC, panelists, fellows, sponsors, and members. Best wishes for a successful virtual conference. I really look forward to the panel discussion.
Hello, and welcome to the 2020 Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute panel on Energy Solutions for a Better Planet. I'm Congresswoman Nanette Diaz-Barragan, and I'm glad I can join you to kick off this important discussion. I represent communities in South Los Angeles and LA County. This summer in California was like no other, as wildfires burned nearby and heat waves tore through our communities, bringing smoke-filled air and instability to our energy grid. Recently, the whole state was required to conserve energy in order to avoid a massive blackouts. Many communities still lost power. Access to electricity can be a matter of life and death. Residents rely on powered medical equipment. First responders need power to save lives. Frontline and vulnerable communities are often hit hardest by extreme weather events and the climate crisis, whether they be wildfires, floods, heat waves, or hurricanes. We need to build a resilient, clean energy systems to ensure that no community is left behind, especially in an era of climate disruption. Now, I'm working on legislation to invest in the deployment of clean energy microgrids to keep the power on for critical facilities in our communities, like public safety buildings and senior housing. We cannot afford to wait. A bold response to the climate crisis can create good jobs with family-sustaining wages, correct inequalities, and build a greener energy system. We can't be intimidated by the enormity of the problem. We all have a part to play. We just have to flip the switch to on. Thank you and enjoy the discussion.
Hello, everyone. This is Val's story. Thanks for being here, and thanks for having me. As Congresswoman just mentioned and other speakers just before her, we are here to discuss energy solutions for a better planet. And I have here with me virtually 3 panelists who are working on policies and programs that support economy-wide decarbonization through a variety of clean energy and energy efficiency solutions. Today, our discussion is going to focus on the urgency with which we must respond to climate change. We'll also discuss the disproportionate effects of climate change on underserved populations, particularly on the Latinx diaspora. And we'll also be talking about the role clean energy technologies and clean energy innovation plays in both increasing reliability and resiliency and in building and accelerating clean energy markets. As a reminder, for those of you joining us today, please type in any questions for the panelists in the Slido platform, and be sure to spread the word and share your thoughts about this panel and other presentations and sessions of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus's initiatives, Hispanic Heritage Conference with the hashtag CHCIHHM20. So with that, I'd like to move on to panelist introductions. First, I'd like to introduce Leslie Gentross from the Bipartisan Policy Center. Welcome, Leslie.
Thanks so much, Val, and thank you for having me. I'm Leslie Gentross. I'm the Associate Director of Energy and Climate at the Bipartisan Policy Center, or BPC. And as the only Washington, D.C.-based think tank that actively promotes bipartisanship, BPC is working to find actionable solutions to the nation's key challenges. And so our energy and climate program is focused on the development of pragmatic and durable federal policies that responsibly transition our country to a low-carbon economy that invests smartly in the next generation of energy technologies and infrastructure and maintains economic growth while addressing the challenges of climate change.
Terrific. Thank you for that introduction. Next, I'd like to introduce Rudy Garza from Dps Energy.
Good afternoon. My name is Rudy Garza. I'm the Chief Customer Engagement Officer for CPS Energy. We are the largest municipally owned electric and gas utility in the United States. Very proud to serve our citizens in San Antonio, Texas, and the surrounding Bexar County metropolitan region. We're one of the fastest growing communities in the country. We're the seventh largest city in America these days with over 2 million people and growing, continuing to grow fast. So we have been on a trajectory to reduce our carbon footprint in what we call our flexible path strategy. So I'm looking forward to sharing some of the information we have on how we're trying to innovate in our industry. But congratulations to CHCI on a successful virtual conference. I look forward to participating, and I'm very glad to be here today. Thank you, Val.
Thanks, Rudy. And our third panelist today is Rosalie Barcinas with Southern California Edison.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. On behalf of Edison International, I first want to say that it's an honor to be one of the sponsors of the session and to be able to participate in this very important topic alongside the other incredible panelists you just heard from today, and share it with CHCI and all the participants listening in today. I'm Rosalie Barcinas, and I'm representing Southern California Edison, which is part of Edison International and is one of the nation's largest electric utilities. We represent a diverse area with the central, coastal, and Southern California area. And approximately 45% of our territory is considered disadvantaged communities. Clean energy, and especially for the underserved areas, is one of our priorities. And if you've listened to the news lately, you'll know that California in particular is currently experiencing devastating impacts from climate change, the large number of fires that have burned over 3 million acres throughout our state just this year. Southern California also has some of the worst air quality in the nation. And that's why it is so important to Southern California Edison and for me to be here to address these issues, discuss solutions, and combat that to ultimately work together towards reducing these impacts and having cleaner air. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion today.
Great. Thanks to the three of you. Well, let's move on to our discussion. I wanted to offer some framing remarks. As Dufinta Menges mentioned, I work primarily with state energy offices on state renewable energy and clean energy policies and programs. So from where I sit, states are at the vanguard of clean energy leadership, creating policies, programs, and incentives to meet the needs of their populations. Likewise, utilities, the private sector, the federal government are right there supporting innovation and taking important steps to decarbonize the economy, as we'll hear during our discussion. But it is at the state level that we are seeing aggressive and ambitious goals and standards being set. So, for example, 14 states plus DC have established 100% clean energy goals, very ambitious, and states are taking a variety of steps to help build clean energy supply chains, grow jobs, support infrastructure development. That said, utilities are taking leading steps and playing a leadership role as well in addressing how to incorporate increasing amounts of variable renewable energy and clean energy resources onto the grid. And these are resources whose outputs vary by time of day or by season. And we're seeing utilities adapting their operations to meet the state goals and as well as adapting their operations to increase resiliency and reliability of the grid. So I wanted to offer up as an example before we began of state program and policies that are an example of some of these leadership qualities that I just mentioned. So as an example, this summer, New York issued its second offshore wind solicitation for up to 2,500 megawatts of offshore wind energy. This solicitation is in direct support of New York's commitment to meet its 9,000 megawatts by 2035 offshore wind target, which in turn supports its Climate and Community Protection Act. And that goal there, that target is 100% carbon-free electricity by 2040. We saw in parallel to this solicitation that New York is offering a complementary funding opportunity for 11 identified offshore wind suitable ports. So this is an infrastructure development program for offshore wind specifically. So as New York is working to meet its net zero carbon goals, it's also striving to build a green energy economy by training a new workforce, supporting infrastructure development, and growing jobs. And lastly, it's also paying attention to renewable energy development's impacts on underserved populations. So again, for example, the offshore wind solicitation I just mentioned includes a special provision in its review criteria, which prioritizes jobs for residents in environmental justice areas. And developers who are interested in responding to this solicitation are encouraged to recruit and train residents of disadvantaged communities so they have opportunities for employment in offshore wind. So, as we move on to our conversation with our three panelists, we're going to hear other examples from across the US on policies and utility programs that are supporting clean energy innovation, clean energy jobs, programs that are improving resiliency, and that address the disproportionate health and climate impacts on communities of color. So, my first question is actually for all three panelists, and probably the best way to respond is how you appear on my screen and hopefully on your screen as well, which I see Leslie, Rudy, and then Rosalie. And so I'll just throw out a softball question to kick it off. How do your policies and programs, A, support clean energy innovation, and B, how do those policies and programs bring these innovations to your customers or your constituents? Leslie?
Thanks so much, Val. And I loved the examples that you provided and the discussion framing what the states are doing. And, we as kind of a more federally focused policy think tank, we're really thinking about how the federal government can play more of a leadership role than it has, in the past couple of years, and really take back some of the initiative for pushing policies that can accelerate the clean energy transition and establish the United States as a leader in technology innovation and, taking advantage of the economic opportunities for, thinking about the technologies that will be needed globally, even, to transition the world economy to cleaner sources of energy. It's really, a foundational aspect to economic development, and especially important, as we're talking in the context of this pandemic and the, economic impacts that have been seen, from the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we think that the federal government, can build on this strong history of funding, research and development programs. You provided a great look into offshore wind, and there have been programs within the Department of Energy for a long time that really incentivize, development and build out of the offshore wind research and development phase, and other innovative technologies that do not produce greenhouse gases, such as energy storage solutions, advanced nuclear reactors, hydrogen fuel cells, other types of zero carbon energy production that can really has the potential to transform our energy system. And so we think that more policy and more federal leadership is needed to enhance these types of programs and to drive investment in kind of the later stages of a lot of this technology development, and really ensure that there's deployment of technologies so that they don't, fall into the cracks of, early stage development, but then never become commercialized. So those are just some of the ways that we're thinking about how to get the technology and innovation at scale that's needed to address the climate crisis.
Great, thank you. Rudy?
Well, where do I begin with this question? Here in San Antonio, I like to say we're doers. The state of Texas passed, our renewable portfolio standards early in 2003 timeframe. Built $7.5 billion worth of transmission infrastructure to get wind out of West Texas and along the coast to our major load centers in the state. CPS Energy was one of the first utilities to jump in the deep end of the water. Up to date, we've procured 1,200 megawatts worth of wind around the state, both West Texas and coastal wind. We're number one in the state of Texas for solar energy. We've got close to 600 megawatts of solar capacity, and we offer our customers solar in every way. You're going to get, solar is part of our regular generation mix, but if you want to put solar on your house, we're going to give you a rebate for that. If you can't put it on your house, if you're a renter, we've got community solar programs, and we'll even rent your roof from you if you can't afford to put up solar panels on your roof. We'll rent your roof from you. We'll put the solar panels up and use that as part of our generation portfolio. So we've been a utility company that has supported innovation in our industry for decades now. We have just released, as part of, I mentioned our flexible path strategy, we just released an RFI related to what we're calling our Flex Power Bundle, which will include 900 more megawatts of solar, both distributed and utility scale, 50 megawatts of battery storage. We believe that renewables become scalable when you pair, wind and solar with battery storage, and so we're starting to gain experience in batteries, and this will be part of our program. And then we'll another 500 megawatts of firming capacity. San Antonio is one of the lowest income communities in the country, and if we didn't keep an eye on that, we wouldn't be doing what we need to be doing for our customers. So maintaining reliability and affordability is every bit as important to us because of our low income customer base as innovation is. So we try to do what we call balancing the tried and true of what a utility should be for the customers with the new. And that's what our flexible path strategy is all about.
Thank you. And Rosalie.
Thanks. At Southern California Edison, it starts with our vision, and that's our pathway to 2045. It's a vision that we put into a white paper, with detailed data-driven analysis, and that really maps out a feasible and, importantly, affordable path required to get California to a carbon neutrality by 2045. In the sake of time, I'll provide some highlights for that pathway and some examples of what we're doing at Southern California Edison to get us to those goals. Really, we think this clean energy future advances the long-term health and safety of our customers by not only mitigating climate change, but reducing customer energy burden as well by 2045. It calls for decarbonization of the electric sector, which includes utility scale clean generation and energy storage, significant electrification of transportation and buildings, which calls for 3/4 of light-duty vehicles. It's approximately 26 million vehicles that need to be electrified, 2/3 medium-duty and 1/3 heavy-duty vehicles to be electric. And for building electrification, we see 3/4 of space and water heating being necessary. And also, we need to look at low carbon fuels for hard to electrify areas, such as heavy duty transportation. Pathway to 2045 also calls for innovation more than technology. It includes federal and state policies, customer incentives. It's thinking differently about how we get there. It's a vision not just for SCE, but for all of California. It requires collaboration across all sectors in order to be successful. I'll provide a couple of real examples as well as what we're doing, like I mentioned, to help support and promote this pathway. At the national level, SCE is working with coalitions such as Electricity Evolved, which is an electric utility-led national coalition that has support from multiple industries, including electric vehicle manufacturers, environmental advocates, and we're working here to advocate for increased electrification in the U.S. economy. At the local level, in 2017, SCE launched the Clean Energy Access Working Group, which is a groundbreaking partnership with the Greenlining Institute, environmental and community groups, and faith-based organizations to work together to develop clean energy projects for disadvantaged communities. We also have at Southern California Edison the Clean Fuel Rebate Program that also applies to used car purchases, which is, we think, critical as far as getting customer adoption. We also recently converted the program to be a point of sale rebate in order to reduce the out-of-pocket cost for a vehicle at the dealer, so the customer doesn't have to come up with a cash up front, wait for a rebate check. So these are some of the ways that we're trying to think differently in order to move forward the very ambitious clean energy goals we have.
Terrific. Thanks, Cesar. Great innovative programs. Rudy, I wanted to circle back to you for just a moment. So you mentioned that CPS Energy has been working for decades on clean energy solutions. So what motivated CPS Energy? How did you come to embrace renewables and clean energy solutions?
Well, the great thing about being a municipally owned electric, utility is, we run into our customers at HEB. My neighbors know I work for CPS Energy, and they're not shy in telling me when they have a power issue and what they think about the job that we're doing. And so, our community has been mindful of, our carbon footprint and how to move in the direction of being more environmentally sustainable while continuing to provide really high reliability. In San Antonio, you're not out much. Mentioned some of the challenges that California is facing right now. Our customers are out less than once a year on average, and are out less than an hour a year on average. So they expect the lights to come on when they want it. So for us, we have taken thoughtful steps into a more sustainable future. I mean, we own it all. We do nuclear. We still have one coal plant that's got all of the environmental standards necessary, but we're having conversations about what the future of that facility is. We've got natural gas. We've got a little bit some nuclear. So we are a fully diversified utility, but we have also made thoughtful investments in future technology. So when they become scalable, we're ready to scale them up. And that started the minute wind became available. We jumped in quickly because our community told us it was important to them.
Thank you. Great. Several of you have mentioned wildfires and the impact on communities at large. In light of wildfire season, in light of hurricane season, Rudy and Rosalie in particular, can you talk about strategies that you are implementing or considering to implement to improve resiliency?
I guess I'll start since I'm to the left of Rosalie on the screen here. Resiliency is something that we take very seriously here in San Antonio. As you mentioned, if a hurricane hits Houston, a hurricane hits Corpus Christi, it's inevitably going to find its way ultimately into our region. A couple hours inland. So the investments that we're making to make our system more resilient is really, really important. We've got some very aggressive capital investment programs. We know, for instance, that we've got poles that need replacing that are going to break the minute the wind gets above 50 miles an hour as a result of a hurricane. So proactively going out there and replacing that infrastructure, finding ways to underground infrastructure. People don't like our customers don't like their trees trimmed in San Antonio. We've got beautiful oak trees here. And so it's becoming harder and harder to trim trees. So does it make more sense in some areas to underground that infrastructure to ensure that when a storm comes through, we don't have as significant an impact? Plus, San Antonio is Military City, USA. We got 22 missions in San Antonio. Military is our largest customer. And so it's important that we maintain that infrastructure, which has national security implications. So we are investing heavily in a number of really innovative ways to try to make our systems more resilient.
As far as Southern California Edison, we have a very robust wildfire mitigation plan. Consists with three main pillars, and the first is bolstering our situational awareness capabilities. And this is getting real-time, localized weather data so that we can better predict when conditions lead to wildfire potential. And that includes installing more than 850 weather stations to date. The second part of that is enhancing our operational practices. So enhancing our inspections, and that's improving the frequency of equipment and structural inspections, looking at much broader vegetation management. It's using drones, new technology, to enhance those inspections as well. The third area is hardening the grid. And so this includes installing covered conductor. So what that does is if an object like a tree branch or other windblown debris contacts the power lines, that insulated covering around the line reduces the chance of an arc or a spark occurring. And so that minimizes the chances of wildfires, but also helps to improve in the resiliency area.
Thank you. Leslie, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think a couple of things that haven't been mentioned yet are the role of distributed energy technologies, such as inclusion of rooftop solar with backup battery systems or microgrid systems that can help communities who are affected by whether it's extreme weather events like or wildfires to have kind of a local source of energy. And so diversification of the energy supply helps, to reduce some of the risk associated with extreme weather and kind of the resiliency effects. And I think, the connection to what we were talking about earlier with, impacts to disadvantaged communities, the environmental justice questions around the transition to clean energy is tied up into this too, and how communities can get involved with having clean energy sources available to them. And so I think that there's a lot of connection between a lot of the technology innovation side of things and creating new ways for customers to engage with their energy system. And a lot of this just wasn't available, 5, 10, 20 years ago. It just wasn't possible. But now we have the technologies to connect customers, to the utilities and to the energy sources. And so it's a whole different world now.
Yeah, perfect. And great segue into my next question, because as you mentioned, Leslie, environmental justice issues are exacerbated through in times of natural disasters, wildfire seasons, hurricanes. And so we know that energy related problems have a disproportionate effect on underrepresented communities, especially when paired with a global pandemic and current natural disasters such as wildfires. These challenges are exacerbated in underrepresented communities, including the Latinx community. So, Leslie, you talked a little bit about solar and storage, but if others have, or Leslie, have other examples about how energy storage and distributed energy resources help provide relief and reliability and can mitigate some of these disproportionate impacts on underrepresented communities. Leslie,
Sorry,
did you want
Val.
to add any further? Sorry, did you want to add any further examples, or others feel free to jump in on programs or examples from your service territory?
Yeah, go ahead, Rudy.
We are. I'm sorry. Okay, I'll go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rudy. Go ahead, Rudy.
Well,
All right.
that is the question that you're asking, Val, is something that we think about every day. Is how do we continue to create programs that are accessible to a very broad cross section of our customer base? We developed 10 years ago our Save for Tomorrow energy plan. It was an ambitious energy and efficiency and demand response program that had a little something in it for everybody. So when you talk about how to impact, disproportionately underserved segments of your community, for us, we've weatherized close to 30,000 homes in our community. That all goes towards helping customers save their bills. The way we have structured our solar programs. Anybody who wants access to distributed solar, as Leslie mentioned, can access a CPS Energy solar program, whether you have the roof capacity or not. The challenge is for low-income customers is the financing, challenges that exist with getting rooftop solar, getting financed for rooftop solar, on your home. So we've tried to create some programs that make it much more. You can go out and buy a panel if that's all you can afford to buy, and still have a positive net impact on the community. So through our Save for Tomorrow energy program, we have tried to create a diverse set of products and services that benefit the low-income customer and that residential or commercial customer who can afford to invest in energy efficiency initiatives, for their home or business. So for us, our energy efficiency, program is how we've tried to access that low income community with some benefits. Rosalie.
Yeah, thanks, Rudy. So SCE has a number of programs that we look at. How do we get to some of the underrepresented and underserved communities, the hard to reach communities, in order to provide more education about a lot of the programs that we have, not Edison, but across the utilities, as far as energy efficiency, as far as savings, as far as incentives that they may qualify for new technology. I'll highlight one program that we're proud of. Is we call it the Empower program, and it's something that SCE has, that we've funded community-based organizations with a program where it's kind of a one-stop shop, where a customer accesses this database, enters their information, and they are able to see all the programs that they qualify for. Whether it's gas, it's water, it's electric utility, what type of rebates they qualify for, and again, what type of incentives. It's been a very successful program for us, and it really, we're targeting, like I mentioned, the hard to reach areas and the underserved areas. So we're seeing a lot of success from that, and that's just one example of the things that we're trying to do to bring the technology into these areas, also make them more accessible as well.
Those are terrific examples. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just like to add from some of the work that I've done prior to joining the Bipartisan Policy Center. I worked, for about 10 years in climate policy for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency and also for state government. And we definitely see a lot of literature and attention being paid to the air pollution impacts of energy generation from fossil sources and others. And so we have a large body of evidence that shows that low-income communities and communities of color are usually disproportionately experience these impacts. And the fact that we have solutions that can drive change in our energy system just really, I think, underscores the need for urgency in the action. And we talked a little bit about that earlier, how climate change impacts are occurring now. We expect them to. So we know that color are often on the front lines of these changes, and that the need and kind of the urgency for action is there. At the same time, we can think about the energy burden of households, the fact that a lot of Black, Hispanic, and Native American households have dramatically higher energy burdens than households. There's a new report out from the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy that talks about, quantifies some of these kind of average energy burdens can be 45% higher than white households. So we're talking about, the impacts on individual, household wealth as well, and the fact that some people are more likely to live in less efficient housing. And so when we design our policies and programs, the need for creating carve-outs, having programs and policies that specifically address some of these well-documented challenges, I think is really important. And so at BPC, we have a list of recommendations related to programs that could be funded as part of a near-term economic stimulus and recovery package. And so we mention the Weatherization Assistance Program and the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program within the Department of Energy. And these types of existing programs, if given additional funding, could aid many low-income households with either bill assistance or additional weatherization and implementing energy efficiency retrofits. So just wanted to mention some of those ideas too.
Great, thanks. Lots of innovative solutions and ideas here. We just have a couple more minutes. I'd like to remind the audience to feel free to type in questions. Now would be a great time through the Slido app. And now back to the panelists. So both Rudy and Leslie, well, all three of you touched upon innovative finance models that your programs and that you're pursuing through policies and programs. Are there other innovative finance specific models that you can think of that can expand the penetration of renewables into the LMI sector? Or for public schools or public buildings, are you seeing banks and lenders getting interested in this space?
So that's a conversation we're having right now. With we meet with the cross section of stakeholders across our service area that give us input on all kinds of aspects of our business. That's how we run CPS Energy. We run it with seeking maximum input from folks who are impacted by the decisions that we make. And we've actually engaged our solar stakeholders as we think about the future of what we're calling our Flex Step program. We achieved our Safer Tomorrow energy plan a year ahead of schedule, under budget, and we exceeded the goal of 771 megawatts, almost by 100 megawatts. So our initial version of our energy efficiency program, highly successful. So we're thinking about what comes next. And one of the things that we're talking specifically to our solar stakeholders is how do we allow our customers to gain access to solar at the lower and medium income levels. And you mentioned schools in particular. We've got a state senator, Jose Menendez, here in San Antonio, who's very interested in getting more solar access for school systems so that they can save money and put more money into the classroom, which I think is a great idea and opportunity. Something like that, we're going to have to work with the state legislature on policies to figure out how to get there. But we're communicating with our solar stakeholders to try to go to some of these really innovative financial institutions and figure out how we can, marry the format of our rebate with the potential financing, option for that customers can work with solar stakeholders on directly to try to find the right balance and maybe, buy down the cost of that solar system so that lower income customers have access. So for us, it's a partnership with our solar installers here in San Antonio to try to figure that out.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to have to just cut off this part of our conversation and jump over to audience questions. I think the first one is best suited for Leslie, but others feel free to jump in. This one relates to carbon capture and storage. The person asks, what role does carbon capture and storage and other net negative technologies play in reaching net zero? And how feasible of a solution is this for mitigating emissions?
Thanks so much. And yes, I'm glad you asked that because, we here at BPC have a number of policy recommendations related to the need to invest more federal resources and attention into all strategies related to negative and kind of net zero focused technologies. And so we have some work ongoing. We have a direct air capture advisory council, and we are just launching a new initiative related to sequestration of carbon in natural resources within agricultural soils and forests. And so there's a range of opportunities here to create programs and invest more research and build out of technologies that do capture and sequester carbon in the long term. And so carbon capture utilization and storage can also be as part of the electric generating system, but I think that there's kind of a wider set of opportunities when we're talking about decarbonizing economy-wide. Particularly industrial sector emissions are known to be a very hard area for decarbonization because there are fewer alternatives than there are in, say, the power sector. And so carbon capture and other forms of carbon removal technologies can really serve to help meet our climate goals by reducing those sources of emissions that are the hardest and most expensive to decarbonize.
Rudy or Rosalie? Anything to add?
Well, what I would say is we put out a request for information regarding new technology because we're in the process of deciding kind of what comes next for us in terms of our generation capacity. And storage of all kinds has come back to us as potential opportunities. Carbon capture is a little challenging because once you pump it into the ground and whatever geographic geological formation that you can find, keeping it in the ground is kind of the trick, right? So whether it's carbon capture or some other form of storage, we got a lot of really interesting ideas back as part of that RFI process that we're looking forward to getting some firm proposals on. So for us, all kinds of thermal storage is on the table as it relates to kind of a diversified approach to our generation mix going forward.
And I'll say for Southern California Edison, both energy storage and carbon capture are critical parts also of our pathway to 2045. We see obviously the sun's not always shining, wind's not always blowing, and recently with climate change, all of that is even more unpredictable. And so energy storage is critical to capturing a lot of that power and for resiliency and using it at times when that energy is not available. Carbon capture, like I mentioned, is also a critical component. As we don't see a way through even the renewables and decarbonization to get to 100% neutrality. And so we definitely see carbon capture as a part of that as well.
Yeah. The next audience question talks about the urgency of meeting some of these climate challenges. And, we were just talking about carbon capture and storage. That's something that could be put into place now to drive down emissions now. So the question is, conversations around climate change often focus on the long-term solutions, but what are immediate actions and steps that we can make within our own communities? I'll start with you, Leslie.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really important point, is the trajectory of this transition. So we have, near term, or we should be thinking about kind of near term decarbonization and what is available now, and we're seeing a shift. I think we're sort of at this inflection point where, especially within the power sector, we're increasingly seeing renewables and low carbon forms of energy being prioritized, and it's because the economics now make a lot of sense. That this is just kind of the cheapest and the path forward that businesses are now kind of investing in it without need for policies that kind of tell them to do it. But at the same time, we really need additional work and additional focus on the kind of, so we have solutions that can be implemented now, but they're not scaling up fast enough. And so there is a policy gap, and there is need to do more to incentivize the actual build out of these electricity generation resources that can contribute to this zero carbon future that we're all talking about, or the net zero future. And they're just this connection between what we need to be doing and the timing in which we need to do it is really crucial. And so I think it's clear that the evidence suggests that we're not doing it fast enough, and that we need some policies that create incentives and help speed up that transition.
Yeah, just to give some perspective, the last national energy policy was passed during the second Bush, the Bush administration. So, if utility companies were waiting around for the federal government to set energy policy, there would be no action being taken, because we haven't had, energy policy since, the early 2000s. So utility companies have been decarbonizing their fleet. They've been doing it thoughtfully. They've been doing it in a manner that allows technology to catch up. solar's getting more cost competitive, but it hasn't been up until recently because, for instance, in San Antonio, we've got the largest manufacturer of solar panels in North America right here in San Antonio, Texas, because we brought that company and recruited them in to help us, with our 500 megawatt, utility scale project. So while there's certainly urgency that we have responded to in a thoughtful manner, you also got to take note and keep an eye on how do you do that affordably. You don't want to price those lower income customers out of their homes because they can't afford their bills anymore because you've gone all in on solar, or you tripled your energy efficiency program, which, by the way, neither of which those technologies are free. They cost money, and that money is paid for by our customers. And so for us, the urgency has to be balanced with thoughtfulness and affordability for our customers.
And I'll say, at SE, we see the biggest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions and to, our worst air quality in the nation is transportation. And so, we've got aggressive goals and programs to try to implement those things now, but it relies on customer adoption. And so, to your point, Leslie, how do we get this out into the communities that most need it? And so I'll say, one of the programs that we have is called Charge Ready 2. And it's a program that was recently approved by our regulator, the California Public Utility Commission. And it builds on a previous Charge Ready program that we have to install charging infrastructure. And so that's part of getting access, into some of the underserved areas. We have a commitment to install half of the infrastructure into some of the underrepresented and disadvantaged communities. So that's just, one part of how we're trying to implement these programs now in order to incentivize and have customer adoption, especially in the transportation electrification area.
Great, thank you. We have 5 more minutes, so I'm going to throw out one more question, and I would ask that your responses be a little bit shorter than we've done in the past. So the next question is about how to engage and incentivize consumers to take action. And while I was reading the question, I was thinking about some actions that states have taken, and I thought about the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center's home pledge, where they're asking homeowners to take a pledge that they are going to decarbonize their home, and they provide a checklist, and they also provide a list of these are the incentives that are available to you from us and through your utility to decarbonize your home. So the question is, what are other mechanisms, what are other incentives for consumers to reduce their own carbon footprints, and how can energy leaders be incentivized to provide these options to consumers? Leslie, I'll start with you again.
Sure. Well, I think the types of consumer-facing and demand-side programs we haven't spent too much time talking about that, but I think it's really a key aspect of a lot of, at least from my perspective, federal government programs do flow to a lot of the state and more local programs that help offset the upfront costs of some of these energy efficiency measures that can help reduce individual household carbon footprints. And I think what Rosalie was mentioning regarding electric vehicles and kind of the connections between some of our power sector policies and some of the transportation climate solutions is going to be really important. And how do we help consumers take advantage of rebates and access to information about new clean energy technologies? Because a lot of it is just education and understanding on the part of consumers of the availability of some of these things because they're new. And so just helping people take advantage of the new things that are out there.
Yeah, just real quickly, it's got to be a thoughtful community effort. Doing it piecemeal is a challenge. San Antonio passed this climate action and adaptation plan last year. We signed the Paris Accord a couple of years ago. My CEO stood there with our mayor, and it really has to be a collaborative effort where building standards, have to come into play. Transportation policy at the local level has to come into play. What, our utility companies are doing as it relates to all aspects of the business, not just on the generation side, but you mentioned, EVs. How do I get an EV bucket truck that they don't even make yet that will help me decarbonize, our company fleets to do our part there, requiring, infrastructure in homes so that if you want to go out and get an EV, you've got to plug in right there and you're ready to go. So you don't have to invest in that. All of those policies kind of will move the needle exponentially if they're comprehensive. And for San Antonio, that's what we're trying to do through our climate action and adaptation plan.
And I agree with everything that Leslie and Rudy, said here. And, I want to highlight, working with our communities is so critical. And so you both mentioned that education is a critical part of it, right? Not only informing the impacts of what's happening today, but, what is available to them as far as energy efficiency, starting with just a light bulb, right? And rebates and incentives that might be available to them, but also listening to them to hear what their barriers are, what their challenges are, and moving forward with some of these technologies, with understanding these programs. And that better informs the policies and programs that we at the utilities and at the state level, are pursuing. So I think it's definitely critical that we continue to work with our communities.
Great, thank you. So we have reached the end of the time that we've set aside for discussion, and I'd like to move on to closing comments, and I will go in reverse order this time. So Rosalie, we'll start with you, and then we'll move to Rudy and finish with Leslie, and then I'll wrap us up. Rosalie, any
Great.
closing comments and takeaways?
Yeah, thanks. At first, I'd like to maybe close out with comments on two areas, that we about, today, clean energy and also improving diversity and equity. And these are really two critical issues in our country at this time, right? Regarding clean energy, SCE, we see ourselves as not just an industry leader here in this space, but also a critical partner with both the state of California and federal government. We support the congressional efforts to reduce harmful emissions that adversely impact our disadvantaged communities, and we're proudly working towards these same important goals. Earlier, we heard from Congresswoman Barragon, and we'd like to thank her for her commitment to combating climate change and furthering environmental justice and improving equity. I want to extend a specific and special appreciation for her work with Representative Tony Cardenas on the Clean Commutes for Kids Act, as it was just passed in the House earlier this year. As some of you may know, this bill authorizes the EPA's Clean School Bus Program to allow electric buses to compete for funding in this program for the first time. Edison similarly is working, to allow clean school bus programs in our territory. The second area I mentioned is around diversity and improving equity. This is not just a focus in assuring equity in our clean energy goals so that we do not leave any of our underrepresented or disadvantaged communities behind. It's also important in our workplace. SCE is striving to become one of the most diverse electric utilities in the country, and it's important to us that we represent the communities that we're so deeply embedded in and that we serve. Our goal is to create a positive and equitable work environment, but also importantly, to also build increased opportunities in the diverse communities we serve. In an effort to provide transparency, we've publicly shared detailed data on our workforce and the status of our business partners, as well as our community investments. We're not aware of other companies that have shared this level of detail, but we believe it's the right thing to do. And providing this level of transparency is the first step in identifying areas where we can improve. And although we recognize the progress we've made to date, we committed to making even more meaningful change in our workplace and our broader society. We see these two areas being, definitely connected: clean energy and equity across the board. SCE and Edison International remain committed to working together toward our collective clean energy goals, the efforts laid out in our Pathway 2045, and investing technologies to help California decarbonize its economy. And like I mentioned, improving greater equity across the board. This has been fantastic conversation. I appreciate all the great questions from our audience. Thank you for all of your passion here and for the great discussion today.
Great, thanks. I know we're coming towards the end of our hour, but Rudy and Leslie, I'd love for you to have the opportunity to make a few closing remarks.
I'll just thank CHCI for the opportunity to join this panel. The work that you do is really important to our Latino and Latinx communities across the country, and being represented at the federal level is really important. CPS Energy is ecstatic to be a partner of CHCI's, and we thank you for including us today.
Yeah, I'll just echo everything else that was said. A really, huge thank you to CHCI. This is such an important topic. We feel, just as illustrated by the wide-ranging conversation we've had today, climate change and energy solutions covers so much ground, and we're really going to have to work hard to continue to push policy in all of these different areas. So thank you.
I want to say thank you to everyone. MCs, if I'm running over, feel free to just cut me off, but thank you to CHCI and to the three panelists for joining us. I just wanted to offer some high-level takeaways. Equity is something we must all pay attention to, and it's in the forefront of utilities and state program and federal programs' minds. Resiliency must play a role, and we can't leave out our disadvantaged communities. We also heard that a diversity of renewable and clean energy solutions across the board are needed to meet today's carbon challenges and meet aggressive carbon goals. I'll leave it there. Run out of time. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us.